Be black. Be bold. Be innovative. Show the world equitable geo.
We're coming together as a collective to celebrate people of African descent, the diaspora, and talking about geospatial equity and justice.
You're listening to The North Star Gaze, a podcast with intimate stories from geo luminaries.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with Margo, who's a visiting scientist with the National Academies. And I am going to have Margo do the honors of introducing herself to our listening audience.
Thank you so much, Aisha. I'm Margo Corum. I'm actually, as she mentioned, a visiting scientist with the National Academies of Science. I am visiting from the U.S. Geological Survey. I've been with the survey for 27 years. Sounds like a long time. I started when I was 2. And I've held every almost position up to my current role within USGS. I started off at the end of my freshman year as a lab technician and went back for my master's somewhere in between that, but worked my way up through project leads on 2 big mandated projects congressionally, to center management, and to my current role that I'm on sabbatical from as associate program coordinator.
Oh, you get sabbatical?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yes, a lot of fun.
See, things to explore. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, well, one, I want to find out what it feels like to be on sabbatical. But what are you doing on your sabbatical?
So I'm actually running, the National Science Foundation, they did a consensus study, and it started during COVID, and they had a lot of in-person activities that were planned that were, part of that study for Earth System Science. And so with the leftover funds, they actually had proposed 3 or 4 different activities. So I'm running 3 different workshops. I had one in January, which was on cascading tipping points, one this past summer, which was on climate intervention, all with the Earth System Science focus. And in the final leg, my last workshop will be on climate and human migration. So in the process of, the committee has just formed, but starting that to kind of get that ginned up and, and then move on afterwards.
Is it going to be available to the public?
Yes. So actually, all of the workshops it depends if they're hybrid or virtual or, 100% one or the other, are usually free to the public. You can, go on the Academy's website. I'm with the Board on Earth Science and Resources to kind of see their different activities. Even with the nominations for the committees, I did not really know this, even though I've done and paid for a study from the USGS, is that the general public can actually nominate experts for these committees. And so we sometimes get a long list. It just depends. So we have to go through a vetting process to see what we're looking for expertise, and it varies. But so it's it's interesting to kind of peek behind what they do, but also what I appreciate more about this is just the level of the volunteers is indescribable. I mean, you can bring in the who's who. So for the tipping points, I don't know how we got him to come in, but there's the guru of tipping points, Tim Linton, who's at Exeter in the UK, was on our committee. He's actually now on a roundtable at the Academies and his first time serving. So it's just it's the people, it's the quality of people, even the speakers. It's just it's a really interesting dynamics of what they do and how they actually put together their reports and their studies and their workshops.
All right. Do send us a link.
I will definitely send you that.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to throw out a term that has been brought up over these past 2 days, and I want you to honestly tell me how it resonates with you. Okay. So let's talk about imposter syndrome.
So imposter syndrome. So this resonates with me 2 different ways. So I'll start with the more gentler side with it, of just being a Black woman and a minority in the geoscience field. It's a predominantly white dominated, used to be more male, but it will just say overall white dominated fields. And so to me, the gentler side of imposter syndrome is being a Black woman of the 2 sides to me, from a professional to a personal side. Your interactions of feeling that you have to always be on, always be above board, something that a Caucasian colleague may say, and you could say it the same way, exact same tone, may come across differently. But it's also recognizing the space that you're in, but not deterring from the space that you're in, but figuring out how to navigate and empowering yourself to not be that person in the room. I don't want to say angry, but to not fill that void that that others are looking for to place you in the box. On the other side of it, and this is a little bit more touchier, it's going to be the flip side of having non-Black individuals making our personal struggles or things that we all relate to as a community and turning that into their, personal strife or something that they've gone through. But in actuality, you can't relate because you haven't walked in my shoes or your shoes. So
we call that tears of some sort, right? Tears. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So I feel like there's two components to that. It's just we as a culture, I believe, I grew up in a predominantly white area. I've learned early on how to navigate, and not everyone's afforded that, right? It's just where you are. And some of us have to learn further in life because we look at everyone as, equals in that sense. And you hope that they look at you in that same light, but you really have to learn how to really navigate that and also understand you still can be your authentic self without showing all of yourself.
Yes.
So
yes. That's a survival mechanism. Okay. So be in spaces that celebrate you, not in spaces where you have to survive.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. So I know one of the litmus tests I have for checking someone's diversity. So when we hear, and we heard this all through the pandemic, people told us Black Lives Matter, and then they actually did things to say, no, we were joking, right? So what's your litmus test for assessing whether a company, an organization, a nonprofit, a small business is walking their talk?
I think it really shows, I'm going to say this, based on the current administration and the support for diversity, those are all positives. But it's really, you have to lead by example in your actions. Do you show up, right? Are you there for selfish reasons, like to move ahead because this looks good on your resume or it looks good to other managers? You really have to show up and put your money where your mouth is, right? Just telling me that we've created a plan or we're trying to bring in more students or employees or whatever that may look like, we can all talk about it. But until it comes into action and you actually see it, that's to me the litmus test because, and I'm not saying we need to hire the best and the brightest, doesn't make a difference. But again, you gotta walk the walk. You can't just speak it and think that it's gonna evolve from there.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to get a little bit personal. So I think many of us as Black women who are in tech spaces and academic spaces and scientific spaces, we are sometimes one of the only or a few in the room, in these organizations, in the clubs, at the conferences. How did you, or have you, found your community?
So this is a twofold, being that where I work is predominantly white. Nothing wrong with that. I've been told I have walked in a room like I own it. I did not know I was doing that, but it to me, what that is I'm confident in myself. I may have been falling apart on the inside and had no clue, but outwardly, I own what I'm doing. I stand behind it and I'm confident. I think that's the biggest thing. But I think fairly recently in all my years of being at the survey and other places and being exposed and being at, really large conferences and organizations, I am the only one. I grew up being the only one in the room in some of my classes and things like that. So I've experienced things on both ends. But when I found my people, which was fairly recently, it was reinvigorating on so many levels. One, I didn't know this was out there. Two, had been around for so long. It just, when you find your group that you can connect with, that you don't even always have to say things and you know what's going on, head nods, moving. It's a whole vibe. And it's comforting in so many ways because it then affords you a very safe place. And we don't always have those places that are safe that you can turn to. And, I can pick up the phone. I can talk about whatever, personal, work, and it's always safe or the part of connecting. That's one of the other beautiful things. I had met a few individuals and I have just been brought in. And some of these individuals, it's kind of hilarious. Most think I've known them for years, and it's been maybe 2.
Yes, and it's like a virtual hug, and so it's one of the things. So when the pandemic hit, North Star had started getting its legs under them. We knew where we were going, and when the pandemic hit, we were poised in a very unique way. We each, myself, Clinton, and various other people within the company of the Black diaspora, we had our own networks of people, and we brought them all together. So as we went from being invisible to neon visible, we had a safe space to go and just be. Like, it wasn't like we were on Center Street, right? And so that felt comforting. And so from that point forward, every Black individual who joined the company, we would meet them. We would bring them into the fold, right? Because that isolation can be crippling. It can be real. And if you don't have people to say it's not you, it's them, it's the systems, it's the structures, then you could sometimes internalize what people tell you are your skill sets, right? And so I think knowing and having people say it's not you, it's the system.
No, I agree with that. And I also think it's also of just having the confidence in yourself. I mean, we all make mistakes, and to stand in your truth. And I think that's one of the biggest values of that is you can stand in your truth without being obnoxious or whatever, or how it comes across. You stand in your truth. And to me, I think that's extremely comforting, that I can, any decision I've made, I'm okay with it. Because I have morals and integrity, but that's my truth, right? And I won't do anything that would actually jeopardize my integrity.
Yes.
And or if it doesn't feel right, I won't do it.
Right. I love it. Let's talk a little bit about career advice. So we're here at this intimate event. I won't say it's exclusive, but it's really intimate. From your perspective as a longtime career professional, what's the value of these more intimate events? Because we think of conferences, we think of these different venues where young people go to display their talents and, vie for positions. What's the value in smaller events?
So I think the smaller events actually is twofold for the attendees, presenters, and the students, because one, you get to have more of a one-on-one conversation and more intimate conversation. We all pick up from each other, if you're being authentic or not, or guarded. We can all pick that up very clearly. Some may not, but we can. But I think the other part of that is, so you do have more of that one-on-one and that time to communicate and have those type of conversations. But I think from also the professional side, we get to build our network. We get to have authentic, unfiltered conversations, and then just build, connecting networks and building to grow things. And I think that's what it's really all about. It's all about just making the connections.
Making that human connection, yes. It's one of the things that I loved when I was an instructor in the classroom. I had classrooms of 12 people. I did this for 5 years. And you get to meet so many people who are doing awesome and amazing things with the technology, GIS technology, tech in the, geography fields, geostem. And it's like, for me, I tend to lean introvert. So having those opportunities where I know it's going to end, I could lean all the way into the conversations and be like, tell me more about your projects, because I know I have you for 2 days. Yep. I have you for a week. And then I can turn all the way off for the next 2 weeks and then turn it back on. Okay. So last 2 questions, probably the hardest questions I'm going to give you.
Okay. Taking a deep breath.
The theme of this year's homecoming for North Star is resilience and resistance. Resilience or resistance or both?
Both.
And why?
We're all here. You have to be resilient to get through. I mean, there's things that others can't even comprehend that we may go through, or just being isolated. And not everyone is as strong to be okay with that isolation and to be comfortable of being the only one. So to me, it speaks to that. And then the other side of it is that we have to actually come together and fight for what we need. And you have to, sometimes you have to fight to be the voice at the table, or to be heard or to be seen. And again, it doesn't mean you're doing this in this a belligerent or, obscene type of way, but sometimes you do actually have to fight for yourself. So I feel like they both go in, because I don't think all of us would be here without those two terms, in all honesty.
And you got to show up.
Yep.
You got to show up. All right, last question.
Okay.
Using your vast array of professional skills, how would you go about making sure that you survive the zombie apocalypse?
Oh gosh. Ooh, that's an interesting question. I was not expecting that one.
You're about to be eaten, aren't you?
No, not at all. I'm the youngest of 6. Ew, gosh. So I think what skills I would use, I have a lot of different friends and community, right? I would probably be the one to make some calls to see where we need to be and stockpiling, and probably do like something like a commune or something, like a community area, and just to, to form that bond and, gather what we can do to make sure we survive it.
Okay.
But that would probably be like just put my network to work.
All right. So let me tell you. Okay. So I spoke with Sandra this morning. So Sandra's going to mobilize the folks in Colorado with the maps. I've got a garden. My kids are little tiny mini gardeners. We're bringing the seeds. We're harvesting and saving seeds. Frank Bromo, we're going to eat him. And so just kind of go with these conversations. I'm like, we already know who's going to be eaten, who's going to be a liability. So when we run for the gate, certain people, we're just going to leave on the outside to be food for the zombies so that the rest of us can survive. Somebody has to be sacrificed. I know I'm geotagging my kids because I've got this one little one who doesn't know how to close the car door. And I'm like, every morning we get in the car, I'm like, get in the car, close the door, put on your seatbelt. She leaves the door open, has conversations, leisurely puts, I was like, Noelle, the zombies are going to come and get you. And she's like, but what are you going to do, Mom? Are you going to come after me? No, you are now one of them. We're going to have to say bye. So, but yeah, that's my routine in the morning. Wow.
So funny.
Margo, thank you so much for taking this time and having this candid and wonderful conversation with me.
Thank you.
And on that note, thank you to our listeners. I want to thank the sponsors of the 2023 Homecoming Conference event, which was held on Howard University's campus. Thank you, National Geographic Society, National Academies Gulf Research Program, Mapping Black California, Hope and Heal, and Spatial GIS. We also want to give a special thanks to our guests. Thank you for trusting us with your stories. Shannon, Sandra, Kevin, Margo, Frank, Jen, Dr. Luberz, Carrie, Dr. Graham, Gloria, Michael, Eric, Sky, Nick, Dr. Yaboa Kwarkun, Veronique, and Dawn. We also want to thank Howard University for allowing us to present in the iconic browsing room. And to the North Star team, thank you, Shakanda, Raisha, Clinton, Erica, Yolanda, and our volunteers and student ambassadors. Thank you also to KMG. Audio is produced by Cherry Blossom Production, and I'm Aisha, your host and the executive producer of the inaugural season of the North Star Gaze podcast, which is based on the 2023 Homecoming Conference event.
Thanks for listening to the North Star Gaze, intimate stories from geoluminaries. If you're inspired to advance racial justice in geo fields, please share this podcast with other listeners in your community. The intro and outro are produced by Organized Sound Productions with original music created by Kid Bodega. The North Star Gaze is produced in large part by donations and sponsorship. To learn more about North Star of GIS, check us out at northstarofgis.org and on Facebook or Instagram at GIS North Star. If you'd like to support this podcast and North Star of GIS, consider donating at northstarofgis.org/donate. Or to sponsor this podcast, email podcast@northstarofgis.org. You've been listening to the North Star Gaze.